When Donald Trump gave medical advice the other day to the roughly 3 million Americans who are pregnant at any given moment in time, he left absolutely no room for nuance.
I just recommend strongly that you don't use Tylenol. Don't take Tylenol. If you're pregnant, don't take Tylenol. Don't take Tylenol. Don't take Tylenol. There's no downside. Don't take it.
And going even one step further, he seemed to really strongly feel that he was qualified to give this medical advice, even if it went beyond what his own team of experts was willing to give.
Maybe stronger from me than from the group because they're waiting for certain studies. I just want to say it like it is. Don't take Tylenol.
So, being a curious journalist, I wanted to try my best, my level best, to understand where he's coming from. Because even if what Trump says often isn't true,
it doesn't hurt not to do it. It doesn't hurt. There's no downside.
There's still usually something he's getting at. The hard part is just sifting through the vagueness of it all.
You know, life is common sense, too. And there's a lot of common sense in this, and I wish things like this were brought up.
So I've listened to what Trump has to say, I've read the studies his administration cites, and I've heard from experts about how all of these facts and claims should be understood as a bigger picture. I would break down his position as having two main arguments. The first is that there's a genuine correlation between Tylenol and autism. The second is that even if he's wrong, you should take his advice anyway, because the stakes are too high not to. Let's start with correlation. There's an old gag on a Simpsons episode from about 30 years ago where Lisa tries to sell her dad a rock that she claims keeps tigers away.
Oh, how does it work?
It doesn't work.
Uh-huh.
It's just a stupid rock.
Uh-huh.
But I don't see any tigers around here, do you?
And then, spoiler, he buys the rock. I try to keep that in mind whenever someone argues anything from the standpoint of correlation, because just because two things happen at the same time doesn't mean that one caused the other. But let's look at the claim.
There's a very large study, the Boston birth cohort, with researchers that have, from Johns Hopkins, my former institution, and Boston University, found quote-unquote consistent associations between acetaminophen in pregnancy and autism. And the Nurses' Health Study with researchers from Yale, Columbia, and Harvard looking at 9,000 kids found that acetaminophen use in pregnancy was associated with neurodevelopmental disorders. And 4 weeks ago, a Mount Sinai Harvard study reviewed all the existing literature and found the overwhelming body of evidence points to an association.
So Trump's pick for head of the FDA cites 3 studies there, but he keeps using this word, association.
Quote-unquote consistent associations associated with neurodevelopmental disorders. The overwhelming body of evidence points to an association.
So let's go through the studies one by one to see what they actually found. The Boston Birth Cohort Study. They analyzed the cord plasma of nearly 1,000 babies, checking for traces of acetaminophen, which can come from all kinds of medications, but the one Donald Trump seems to be most concerned with is Tylenol. And then they measured what the autism rates for those children ended up being, compared to how much acetaminophen was found in their cord blood samples collected at birth. Their findings, drumroll please, that there were more kids diagnosed with autism the more acetaminophen was found in their cord blood. Sometimes 2-3 times as many diagnoses. But then I was reminded to be very careful about how to interpret these kinds of findings.
It is very important, the difference between correlation and causation, because if you look at mothers who consume any type of medication in pregnancy, usually that exposure will correlate with adverse child outcomes. But the reason is typically not the drug. It's typically the reason for why the mother uses the drug. So the underlying severe infection, the fevers, the other health problems for which you might need medication. You need to account for the reason that why the mother takes the drug and all the other comorbidities.
And the study acknowledges some of these weaknesses. For example, that there were both genetic and environmental factors that they weren't able to measure and take into account, which is basically saying, we found a possible link here, but the cause might still be a whole range of other things. And to be fair, there are those who believe we're seeing increases in autism rates because we simply understand it better.
The criteria for the diagnosis of autism have, widened. So basically, we capture more than we did 15 years ago.
We can diagnose it more credibly, and parents have only become more likely to want to seek those kinds of explanations out. I'm not trying to dump on the study, I'm just being transparent about its own stated limitations. But let's move on. The nurses study. This one took a slightly different approach, where they tried to rule out one reason for finding the association between acetaminophen and ADHD by way of what's called an NCE analysis. Basically, they didn't just consider whether using something like Tylenol during pregnancy had an association with ADHD rates. They also checked to see if using acetaminophen 4 years before pregnancy and 4 years after pregnancy had a similar impact. And turns out it didn't, which feels like it raises alarm bells about how using Tylenol at any other time but pregnancy seems to have no impact on ADHD rates in kids, but using it during pregnancy potentially did. So this would seem to add credibility to the possibility that something like Tylenol, when specifically used during pregnancy, seems to increase the risk of ADHD in children. But again, there's still this same glaring weakness, because by the study's own admission, concerns regarding uncontrolled confounding remain, which is science speak for there are other possible causes we couldn't control for.
There's comorbidities. Okay, does the mother have depression, anxiety? Does she have diabetes? Does she have hypertension and so forth, asthma? Also, other medications exposure. So we're looking at all risk factors and also the reason why acetaminophen is used. Is it for fever? Is it for pain? Is it for migraine?
But Trump's FDA commissioner did go one step further, making a very aggressive claim.
To quote the dean of the Harvard School of Public Health, there is a causal relationship.
Which right away is like, whoa. Okay, now we're talking. This sounds more definitive. Let's hear what the dean has to say.
There is a causal relationship between prenatal acetaminophen use and neurodevelopmental disorders of ADHD and autism spectrum disorder.
Which sounds like, holy crap. The dean of Harvard School of Public Health says there is a causal relationship between these things. Except, best as I can tell, that's completely false. The statement from the dean, as posted by Trump's White House press secretary, who was ironically accusing the Associated Press of spreading falsehoods, the dean's statement says the same thing every other responsible researcher has ever said on the topic, which is that there is evidence which lends support to the possibility of a causal relationship between prenatal acetaminophen, blah, 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 but that right now there's simply an association, no proof of a causal relationship. I even found the study that the guy wrote, which was a study of studies, trying to gather the work of other researchers, all in one place. 46 studies analyzed in all, where just over half showed an association between acetaminophen and neurodevelopmental disorders. But a third of them showed either no association at all, or even a protective effect of taking acetaminophen during pregnancy, in that it actually appeared in these studies to lower the risk of neurodevelopmental disorders. That should tell us two things. One, that Trump's claim isn't based on nothing. There are real scientific efforts to figure out the exact risk profile of a medication like Tylenol during pregnancy. But two, that anyone who dispenses hard and fast rules as medical guidance, the way Trump does,
You know, the way I look at it, don't take it. Don't take it. There's no downside in not taking it.
that's way out of line with how medical science considers these questions. And I'll give you one more reason why. Trump's argument that there's no real downside to following his medical advice, like if he's wrong, whatever, no harm, no foul, you've got an untreated headache. But if he's right, he saved both you and your kid a lot of difficulty down the road. That sounds an awful lot like Pascal's wager, which is the classical argument that we should all believe and follow God, because If we're wrong and he doesn't exist, fine. We committed some finite amount of time to something that was incorrect. But if we're right and there is a kingdom of heaven waiting for us, then that infinite potential benefit outweighs whatever earthly cost attached to belief in something that was never real. So, Trump's take on taking Tylenol?
The word tough it out, it's easy for me to say tough it out, but sometimes in life, with a lot of other things, you have to tough it out.
As far as blanket medical advice goes, every objective expert I've heard from agrees this is terrible because Tylenol doesn't just treat pain.
Acetaminophen is a safe medication to treat high fevers. Remember, high temperatures, core body temperatures, the reason we tell pregnant women don't go into the hot tub for prolonged periods of time. So it can have significant effects on the fetus if you don't treat it. And so it's always a balance of risks and benefits when you're using a medication in pregnancy, and the benefits outweigh any potential risks that there might be.
The real truth of the matter is that it's worth being very thoughtful about a whole range of activities and foods and drink and medications that one might do or ingest or use during pregnancy, and genuine concerns about the use and overuse of even over-the-counter medications have been around for a long time. And while I've yet to see a credible study that advises all pregnant women to avoid Tylenol the way Trump suggests, some studies do say that there's potentially a risk. And so, considering the stakes, it might be a good idea to use as little Tylenol as possible, while still remembering that Tylenol is taken for a reason that provably protects both mother and child from a range of health problems, including, yes, even neurological ones.
This is a tried and tested therapy. It's been around for ages. The reality is we don't have that many good options to treat pain and fever in pregnancy. And if we wipe acetaminophen off as one of those options, it leaves us with very little.
The FDA is planning to require drug makers to show on their acetaminophen labels that the use of acetaminophen by pregnant women may be associated with an increased risk of neurological conditions such as autism and ADHD in children. As a statement, this is true, if also incomplete. Health Canada has issued guidance on this too, writing, acetaminophen is a safe and effective prescription. When used appropriately, the benefits of acetaminophen outweigh its risks. Most Canadians use acetaminophen without any problems. But what Trump is presenting?
Don't take Tylenol. Don't take it. If you just can't, it's fight like hell not to take it.
As far as medical advice goes, it is untethered from any notion of scientific rigor and responsibility. And because science is still studying the question, he may be right, but he may also be wrong.